I had many sleepless nights, and I tried everything. Even the Ambien was, you know, not doing its job. I felt very foggy. I didn't have dreams anymore. And then when I would wake up, if I did sleep, I had a huge, like a panic attack or bad dreams, and it just was miserable. And I gained weight, and I was like, something is wrong here. Say, I'm going to befriend this. Versus what we do is we shove it under the rug or pretend it's not going to be there. And that's not the answer, because it shows its ugly face again. So I look at it and say, okay, what am I going to do? And it doesn't matter what anybody else does. How do I want it to look?
Hi, everyone, and welcome to yet another really special Talking Insomnia episode. We have Lorene with us.
Thank you.
So I know a little bit about your story from an email, and particularly I remember you talking about the process of coming off benzodiazepines, which I thought could be really valuable for our audience to talk about. But with that said, tell us from the beginning, how did you start having trouble sleeping?
It started out actually already in 2020, July of 2020. I had not been feeling the best, and I went to my primary doctor, and he prescribed me blood pressure medicine, which was lisinopril, and I was on it for a month. And then the first sign I saw is I couldn't sleep, and I was like, what the world? So I went back to him, and then he put me on Ambien. Well, that worked great for a bit, but then it went right back to the insomnia, and I'm like, oh, I don't want to experience this. What can I do different? And I also sort of anxious. So they put me on Ativan, which is a benzo. I had no idea what that was. And I think many people today have no idea what it was. And I didn't bother looking at the medication, and I should have. And it tells you on the label not to take it for more than 2 weeks. And I'm like a month into this, and I'm like, okay, I got to get off of these things. They're dependent. But nothing happened, except it did help my anxiety. But it increased, the anxiety increased. And then I went back to my primary doctor, and he was going to increase the Ativan. And I was like, here I am on 3 medications. I've never had that all my life. I'm 60 years old. So what's going on here?
It's hard to jump in, Lorene, but this is happening so fast. It seems like from the moment you told your doctor that you're not sleeping to getting the Ambien and now getting the Ativan, what time period are we talking about?
A month, 1 month.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And during this month, just before we go back to your story, just for context, like, is it more like, you have a hard time falling asleep, hard time staying asleep, choppy sleep, you're sleeping very little? What were your nights like?
They were actually very foggy if I did sleep, but I had many sleepless nights, and I tried everything. Even the Ambien was, not doing its job. I felt very foggy. I didn't have dreams anymore. And then when I would wake up, if I did sleep, I had a huge, like a panic attack or bad dreams, and it just was miserable. And I gained weight, and I was like, something is wrong here. And so because my primary doctor just kind of brushed it off all the time, I decided I'm going to see a functional doctor. I had respect for a friend of mine that was a functional doctor. And I told her all of my story, what's going on. And she said, oh, we'll get that fixed. And they put me on a gut cleanse, and that was okay. I did okay. But finally, after 3 months, I'm like, okay, how much more can you cleanse a gut? So I'm still.
And during this gut cleanse, are you finding you're sleeping easier, or are you feeling less anxious, or it's not really changing anything?
No, it just, I just did a gut cleanse, and the blood work showed my liver's better, my kidneys better, but why am I still on all these pills? And then she said, you know what? I really can't help you. And that was the most devastating day. I was a year into it by this time. And I'm, when you hear those words, you're like, am I really that bad of a person? Because I felt previously my life was pretty good, very involved with church, but I also realized that time, I think, in life, we have our dark moments and our light moments, and we need both of them. Light, you don't do a lot of research, everything's hunky-dory, we just keep going. But when you have a dark moment, you do research, which is a good thing. and I started welcoming the dark side, because that allowed me to see what this is. Like, I didn't have much patience for people when they talked about insomnia, but now I'm having it. And it is a nightmare. It's the longest, dreadful night a person can have. And I started researching, and I'm like, oh, this is the thing. And so I would talk to the functional doctor, and she said, well, as we clean your gut, these things will just wash away. That was not happening. And then she said that news, I can't help you. And she referred me to a psychiatrist. I've never had a psychiatrist in my life, and I'm still on the benzo, and just a little bit, 5.5 milligrams. So that tiny little pill, I would look at it and say, you're controlling my life. You're making that I don't sleep, and I'm still anxious. And so I was like, maybe I should just stop taking it. Well, the psychiatrist said, what we'll do is we'll switch to an SSRI. And by this time, I'm waking up to some of this stuff, and I'm like, okay, am I going to get dependent on this? So I decided not to take the SSRI, and I cut my Ativan in half and then in fourth in a period of maybe 3 months. And by this time, I happened to find David Powers. I don't know, I think you know him, because
Yeah, I know him. Yeah.
through him, I learned about you, because you did an interview with him one time. And that's the first I knew about you, because I was like, surely there's got to be something. And even my functional doctor would put me on herbs for sleeping, and they did nothing. They actually were just like a waste of my money, actually. And also, I felt sometimes it's just in my head. Maybe I'm just weird, but I tried melatonin, and I tried everything. And one thing that did work really well for a little bit was the cannabis. I did do that. And I was like, okay, now I'm good to go. But through maybe a month, I forget, but I would say a month, I was like, this is not working either. But I want to just step back to the benzo thing. So I am on a fourth of a 0.5. That pill is so little. And I just decided, you know what, I'm going to quit it on my own. Because by now I remembered people saying that your answer is within you. So I'm like, what do I feel within me as I walked in the nature and I was meditating? And I was like, I think I can heal myself. And I did something that everybody does, is I went and researched on Facebook and found some benzo groups, and I joined them. But I didn't do that very long, because there were horror stories. And I'm like, that's not going to be my story. And so a week, and with no pill. And in that week, my husband and I decided to take a honeymoon anniversary trip. Not honeymoon. We're married 40 years, so there's no more honeymoons. But anyway, in our trip to Savannah, Georgia, I had the worst panic attack I've ever had in my life. I was up all night, sweated so bad that the whole bed was just wet. And I'm here today to say it doesn't matter if you are on a small dosage or a large dosage of the benzo, you're going to have side effects. You're going to have withdrawals that are horrifying. I had nightmares, and the only place I could find comfort was on the cool tile in the bathroom, which I laid down there and just sweated it out. And I wanted to die. I was like, well, if, this can't be that bad, but it really is. And then I just wanted to go home. I told my husband, I said, I think we should go home. And he said, we drove all this way for nothing, So I'm like, I don't know what's going on. I didn't feel good. I was dizzy. And, especially night times, it seemed to maximize. It was like really bad. And so we did. On Sunday, we went home and missed my nephew's wedding because I couldn't function. It was like weird. But at this point, I'm taking nothing. Okay. So I had, through the functional doctor, lowered my blood pressure. That was no longer on lisinopril. And I, on my own, quit Ambien because it wasn't working anyway. And then the Ativan, I didn't have that for 3 weeks. So I think I can do this. So I came home and I decided to step away from all the benzo groups, because I decided it's not going to be my story. I don't want to do this for 5 years or whatever, people were saying. And a lot of them are like, it's just horrible. And I agree, it is horrible, but it doesn't have to be our story. So I just went within, day after day. I listened a little bit to David Powers, and I did do a session with him. And when I found you, I was like, okay. So I did do a session with, I think it's Alana or
Alina,
Alina.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And she kept saying to me, so what? I would tell her my stories because I thought they were really life changing. And she would say, so what does it matter? And I did get your book, Set It and Forget It. And that was life changing for me. And I was like, can I possibly do this without anything? Because now I'm taking cannabis. So I stopped the cannabis. And for 2 nights, it was perfect. For one, I noticed I was dreaming again. Because with cannabis, you don't dream. I guess it's an artificial sleep, maybe. Because I would remember I would go through a routine of feeling kind of like I'm out of this world, and then I would fall asleep. When I would wake up, I was like, did I even sleep? And my husband said, oh, yeah, you slept. And it didn't feel like I slept. I was just awake. So there's 2 nights when I was taking nothing. I finally had dreams, and I woke up and I felt like I slept. And I was like, oh, this is going to work. And I think, I don't know for sure how long you're doing this, but you're still very hidden. It's like, I wish I would have found you sooner, but that's probably my fault. But anyway, I would love to promote it more because it made perfect sense, not just for sleeping, but for everything in life. We should ask questions. Why or what or why are we doing these things? Because we're so habitual and we're spirit slowed down to physicality. And we just are so dependent on an outside source to get us through life in every area of our life. Lots of times, we do so many things because you just should. And I've raised 5 children. A lot of times it was like, what do other parents do? That doesn't matter. What do I want to do? And that's, if I could do it over again, I would totally go that way. But anyway, so by then I just stopped the psychiatrist, because before I
Oh, sorry, just for context, like about where are we now time-wise?
almost a year.
Okay, and so it started in 2022.
Yes,
So now we are somewhere in 2023.
yes,
Okay.
I think, yeah. And anyway, I just quit her because she would prescribe me an SSRI before I even was on the phone call with her because I did an online psychiatrist. And I thought, you don't even know where I'm at. You don't even know how I feel. Because I felt like I was very successful. And this time I had already tried your suggestion, take nothing. And she didn't even listen to me. She was just like, I already sent your prescription. And I'm like, you have no idea what's going on. I'm just discontinuing you. And she said, oh, you'll die if you stop me. And I'm like, huh, well, I guess I'll die then. So I had to tune out to all those negative approaches and just live my life. What do I want? How do I want it to look? And I would write them out in journals that this is how life is going to be. And I even wrote how I'm going to sleep all night. And I did it for 6 months and it was perfect. It worked out so good. And taking nothing. And I loved how I slept. In fact, I would sleep from 10 to about 6, solid, not waking up one time during the night. And then bam, it just was like, no, nothing. I was awake all night. And so the first night I was mad. I was like, okay, this doesn't work, Coach Daniel. You must not have told us everything. But then I started saying, I'm going to welcome this situation. I'm going to look at it. It's not the end of the world if I don't sleep. In fact, I made myself a friend to my all-nighter. And I did do some Facebook sometimes if I felt up to it. Most times I felt tired in my eyes enough that I would just rest. It was okay. At least I rested. And I was surprised I was able to go to work, which I'm at right now. And because I do the office manager work with my husband. And thankfully, through all of this, I was able to pretty much function. I never lost my job or anything like that. But there was days I was not 100% participant. But anyway, it lasted for, I would say, 2 weeks of this on and off of sleeping. I would sleep one night and then the next night I was awake. And I thought, am I going to do this forever? And I was tempted to go back to the melatonin, but I did one night and it did not work. It made me more awake. And so I knew goodbye to that. So I fell in love, befriended my cannabis. And then one night I said, you know what? I'm going to take this tonight and see what happens. And honestly, I had the worst night. So that again was a sign, don't do that. So I had a couple cannabis left and I just threw them away. I was like, that's the best thing, out of sight, out of mind. And I'm just going to welcome my life as it is. And you know what? I fell asleep and I've been sleeping ever since. So I'm, yeah, it was quite a journey. I would say to people, you know, first of all, I'm doing a little TikTok just to warn people what they should do instead of a benzo, because this was the benzo that created chaos in my life.
Yeah. Wow. This is a real whirlwind story. You told us so much, such short amount of time, but it was all like, it was amazing. Like you took us on a real journey here, Lorene. And it's, and I want to ask you something. When you were, you found these Facebook groups where people were talking about benzodiazepines, and it was like all the horror stories, and you were sort of like saying, no, this is not going to be my story. Where that went in my mind is that there is, of course, real physiological withdrawal symptoms that simply come from stopping taking medication, regardless of how we think of it. That's true. There are withdrawals, but then there's also like the story around the withdrawals. Like when people have some withdrawal symptom and they think, oh no, this is the end, this is really terrible. Like, and that story can in fact maybe cause even more struggle than the actual withdrawals themselves.
Yeah.
What do you think of that?
Well, I think thought becomes things. And, I got the impression, as I would think of these things, and I'm like, well, maybe, I'm going to have that. And I did find a lot of friends that I still have today that just chose to always be positive. So there was good that came out of that. But it's very much more horrifying because people almost celebrate the anxiety and the withdrawals, and we don't have to. Those are the things you look at, you face them, but you go in it with a grateful heart and saying, I'm going through this, because I did tell, I was very uh, an organizer. I had a reunion and I couldn't even go. So just felt people need to respect me for my, what I was going through, but I didn't decide that I'm going to be like this forever. So I forced myself at the time, like when David would say, walk out to the mailbox or do something like that. It didn't feel comfortable. It didn't feel comfortable to see people, but I did it anyway. And if I die, I die, which we never do anyway. So,
Yeah,
so
so true. No, thanks for sharing that. And yeah, I had a couple more questions for you. One of them was this one, like you have a lot of insight and knowledge now. If you could, travel back in time to when you started taking the lisinopril and you were not sleeping, and you started taking you were in that at the start of it all, what would you tell yourself?
Well, I wish I would know then what I know now, is because I was far too dependent on outside resources. And I wish I would have just sat down and just calmly breathe through it. I would have been all right, and I didn't know that blood pressure medicine can do that to a person. And I was clueless about benzos, so it's hard for me to say what I would have done, but I know now, because in December, right before Christmas, I had a ruptured disc where I couldn't even stand up straight. And I'm like, oh no, I had just finished the benzo withdrawal stuff, and now I have this ruptured disc. But at this time, I didn't run to a doctor. I just breathed through it, and I'm like, what am I gonna, how do I want to address this? How does this look for me? And I did do some research, and I decided to do what they call decompression treatment, which is not surgery. And so, but again, the sleepless nights was a little bit challenging because of what I was going through, but it didn't control me. I was able to control that. I would say, in short version, if I could do it over again, I would say, own your own life, love your own life. And then I probably wouldn't have had a benzo trip.
Yeah. Wow, well said. And we already sort of touched upon this, but another question I have is, um, were there things that you learned from this journey that has been helpful in like other areas of life?
Absolutely. Because everything, when it comes up, because we're never going to be free from stresses, worries, whatever, because it's life. But stop and, and embrace, first of all, love yourself and say, I'm going to befriend this. In versus what we do is we shove it under the rug and or pretend it's not going to be there. And that's not the answer because it shows its ugly face again. So I look at it and say, okay, what am I going to do? And it doesn't matter what anybody else does. How do I want it to look?
Yeah.
I would say
Wow.
that's the biggest thing.
That was incredible. I think you shared so much today that the community will really benefit from it and enjoy hearing. So I just want to say thanks so much for being willing to share, Lorene, and thanks very much for being a guest today.
Yes, you're welcome.
All right, we'll be in touch.
Okay.
They say that the best things in life are free. And I truly hope that this free video helps you rediscover something else that is free, which is peaceful sleep. If you do find our content here helpful, then please hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, share it with people, because the more views we get, the more people we reach, the more chances of changing lives we have. The thing is, leaving insomnia for good is actually so simple. You can and will rediscover a beautiful life at the end of this sleepless tunnel. So yes, please share it with people, hit the subscribe button, and you will be a big part of leading the change that we so want to see in the sleep universe. Thank you.